Just waiting for the live streams. Yeah, we're good? Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. It's the day after Purim, so excuse me if I'm a little bit tired and disoriented. But we had a very good time here. So it's great to have David with us. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I'm looking forward to hearing your insight into business and business ethics. Gouraries and business actually have a very big connection. Originally, the Gourarie family in Russia were actually very big businessmen. Unfortunately, the gene didn't make it to this generation, but still somewhat connected. So thank you everyone for being here. What we're going to do is we're going to hear from David, share with us your insights into business and business ethics. Then we'll hear from my father about the Jewish point of view. Because he definitely does not know anything about business, so hopefully he knows something about Judaism. And then we'll have some questions and take some questions from the crowd, and we'll take it from there. So, take it away.
I know apparently there were going to be a lot more people this evening with the coronavirus. I actually asked the doctor to come just in case. But thank you all for taking the risk. I don't know if you hear me. But actually, I should actually also just say that somebody once called me at 8 in the morning and said, "I'm so sorry." They said, I'm really sorry to call you so early. I said, "Mate, 8 p.m. there's a fair chance I'll be sleeping. 8 a.m. there's no chance." So I apologize if I'm not at my peak performance. But the rabbi asked me to talk about ethics, and it really reminded me of a story. He was a Jewish businessman. It's a bit of an oxymoron. But anyway, he said his son came into the office to his shop one day, and he said, "Son, today I'm going to teach you about business." This customer comes in and he buys something and he gives the shopkeeper $20. And when the shopkeeper notices he's got two $20 over there, and he says, "Now, son," he says, "the question is, do we tell our partner or not?" Okay. But I really believe that, I always say, I'm embarrassed to say, but really proud to say, I've actually been using the same slides for the last 33 years, and I think that people often complicate business, and I think it's actually really, really easy. The hard part is, I think, really actually acting on what you do. So I've always said that any organization, and I'd actually say it doesn't matter whether you're BINA or whether you're a company or wherever you're serving people, I really believe that every organization should, I always say, you have to genuinely take care of your customers, your business partners, and your staff, or someone else will. And I always have this slide, which I have on a PowerPoint presentation, where I have customers, suppliers, and business partners in black and shareholders in green. And often people change. They say, "Dave, we think you used the wrong color." I said, "No, I haven't." Because I sincerely believe if you genuinely take care of those three constituents, you're actually going to take care of your shareholders as well. Now, as I say, I've been doing that for about 33 years. And at risk of sounding arrogant, I actually always say I think I was much cleverer when I was younger, because recently I think a lot more people have actually discovered that it's actually not rocket science, that if you actually look at those three constituents, you actually probably will build a decent business. And recently there was a business forum where some of the top business leaders in America, I think the chairman is a guy, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, and there were 180 business leaders who actually signed a statement saying shareholder value is no longer the main focus of some of America's top business leaders. The reimagined idea of corporation drops the age-old notion that corporations function first and foremost to serve the shareholders and maximize profits. Rather, investing in employees, delivering value to customers, dealing ethically with suppliers, and supporting outside communities are now at the forefront of American business goals, according to that statement. I could have taken that slide a long time ago. So I'll just read you some of the statement of purpose of the corporation that actually was covered by that business forum. While each of our individual companies serves its own corporate purpose, We share a fundamental commitment to all of our stakeholders. We commit to delivering value to our customers. We commit to investing in our employees. This starts with compensating them fairly and providing important benefits. It also includes supporting them through training and education that help develop new skills for a rapidly changing world. We foster diversity and inclusion, dignity and respect. Dealing fairly and ethically with our suppliers. Supporting the communities in which we work. And finally, generating long-term value for shareholders who provide the capital that allows companies to invest, grow and innovate. Each of our stakeholders is essential. We commit to deliver value to all of them for the future success of our companies, our communities and our countries. So now, as I've always said, take care of your customers, your suppliers and your staff, or someone else will. It would be unbelievably easy if you didn't have this juggling ball here called cash flow and profitability. So it doesn't mean because you look after those three constituents that you don't have to be profitable. Because you can't invest in your people, you can't invest in your infrastructure if you're not running a profitable business. And that is the challenge that every business has. That how do you taking care of your staff would be unbelievably easy if you said, working in the technology industry, it's really, really stressful. So don't worry about taking 4 weeks leave. We're going to give you 8 weeks leave. And a market-related salary is X. We pay 2X. You'd be an unbelievable company to work for 6 months, and then you'd be getting your CV up to date to, it's the same with the customer. If you had a customer and you said, a market-related for our service is X, and we pay, you only have to pay us half X, you'd be an amazing partner for a short period of time. So how do you somehow maximize customer and staff satisfaction, but you have to make a buck at the same time as well? Rabbi Gourarie and I've had this challenge often, saying, first thing I said to the rabbi, I said, is anyone paying to come here tonight? because BINA, like any organization, has got to deliver value. You customers, there are customers that are coming tomorrow, and somehow every organization, no matter whether you're BINA, whether you're Coles, whether you're Woolies, whether you're an Amazon, has to say, how do we continue to deliver value to our three constituents, but we have to make a buck at the same time. So I always say I could write a book on lucky breaks, and the book would be that thick. So many things happened in my life that if they happened any slightly differently, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be speaking here today. And I always say the luckiest break was my first job in Australia. I was paid badly, I think treated badly, and I had absolutely no say in what I did. I was earning $2,000 a month, and actually one of my customers had actually said they'd offered me a job for $4,000 a month. And I thought if ever I wanted to start a company, my opportunity cost was so low. This was my chance to start a company. If I was earning $4,000 or $5,000, it would have been way too risky. I had a wife, still do, and a young son who was a year. And as I always say, my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "You go get yourself a job like any normal South African." And 2 years later, she did say, "Why didn't you give me any shares?" But I really believe, so when you look at business ethics, I really believe that if I didn't like being treated like that, if I was ever going to start a company, and if I ever employed somebody, nor would they. It wasn't rocket science, it wasn't anything that I learned. I just thought, so if I ever start a company, I'm going to make sure I pay people a fair salary. I'm going to make sure that they absolutely love coming to work every single day. And I'm going to make sure, most importantly, that if someone has a good idea, I'm actually going to listen to that idea. If they've got some input, and I always say 99% of the great ideas in our company came from people other than me. And I hated that feeling of saying, you pay, that you pay to do, not to think. And so I made up my mind that if I ever start a company, that's what I expect. I always said, by the way, a good relationship is two people. I always said, take a triangle, draw a line down the middle, and that triangle should always be equal. If you have a good relationship, whether it's with a friend, if you've ever had a friend where you feel I'm doing everything for this relationship and they know it's because that triangle's not balanced. And it's the same when you get a job. When you employ somebody, you've got to give them good remuneration. They've got to love doing what they're doing, and you want them, and they want to be able to contribute. Everybody wants to have a purpose. And to balance that triangle, what I always said, what we expected from people who worked in our company, we wanted people who were absolutely committed to what we used to call legendary customer service. We wanted team players, and we wanted people who were going to add value. You know, it was no use saying someone was, you know, adding value didn't mean how many years you've worked in the organization for, didn't mean how many hours you work in the organization. It's really it's your contribution that counts. And as this article says, is investing in your employees. It includes supporting them through training and education that help develop new skills for a rapidly changing world. And I think no matter what organization you're in, every organization is going through unbelievable change. I think whether you're a doctor, whether you're dealing with the community, you have to keep re-educating yourself so that you can add value to your customers. And we expected people in our company to make sure that they were able to add value to our customers. And as long as we delivered our part of the bargain, we expected them to deliver their part of the bargain, which was, as I say. And by the way, delivering amazing customer service, sometimes people never ever deal with external customers. They're dealing with internal customers. So if like, pick on Eddie, if you've got a medical practice, there may be somebody in that accounting room who may never ever see an external or a patient. But Eddie may be relying on some information to be getting to a surgeon or to someone that he's referred information to, that's critical for him to be able to provide input for that patient. So a customer is an internal customer, an external customer. And as I say, I think as long as those three sides are delivered from both people, it always works. Now, someone once said to me when I said it's good remuneration, job satisfaction, and having a say in what you do, I was actually asked to present at a charitable organization. And somebody said, that is the biggest lot of rubbish I've ever heard. He said, I work for St. Vincent's and I actually don't earn a cent. And I said, look, I didn't say that each one of those remuneration, job satisfaction, and having a say in what you do needs to be equal. For some, it doesn't have to be a 3 out of 9 for each. Some person may say, for me, where I am in my life, I'll put up with my bosses. I'm trying to think of the right word to say in a religious organization. I can say. Crap, sorry, Rabbi. I'll put up with that. I'll put up with my boss's nonsense because I've got bills to pay and I'll just do it as long as I have to do it. Some person may say, I don't care about the remuneration. I want to give back to the community and I want to work in this charitable organization, and that's what motivates them to go to work every day. So, yeah, depending on where someone is in their life, someone may say, I love my job, but I can't pay my bills. I hate my job, but I'll put up with this nonsense until I've paid the bills. And everybody wants to have a purpose. The rabbi and I were just talking about someone who said the guy's really happy, he's got an awesome job. I said, I think everybody wants a purpose in life. Everybody wants to know that they're going to wake up in the morning, they're going to do something and say, I made a difference today. So as I say, if I go back to that first slide, just to tell you how clever I think I was when I was younger, I actually went and found my sort of business mentor who I read about is the guy Jack Welch. Jack Welch ran General Electric, one of the most successful companies during his tenure. I think it went from a valuation of about $40 billion to about $400 billion in the 20 years that he ran the company. And he had some amazing business principles, but he was obsessed with shareholder value. He recently died, maybe the last week, and somebody sent me, because they knew that I really valued his business values. But he said, Welch later acknowledged his relentless pursuit of shareholder value was problematic and argued a company's main constituencies should be employees, customers, and products. Just in today's paper, Scott Morrison talking about the coronavirus, how you support your customers, your suppliers, and employees during the next 6 months will say more about your company, your corporate values, and the integrity of your brand than anything you could possibly do. I just finished reading an amazing book about Bob Iger, who just has recently retired as the CEO of Disney, and also did an amazing job transforming that company from every perspective, from their culture to really positioning them as an entertainment company for the 21st century. So years later, when I was given the chance to lead, I was instinctively aware of both the need to strive for perfection and the pitfalls of caring only about the product and never the people. And then somebody at my office said to me, just by chance, just before I was reading, she was talking about someone who started the duty-free shopping chain and was the first billionaire to say, I actually don't need all this money, before Bill Gates and Warren Buffett gave all their money away. He gave all his money away. And in his book, it says, having a kind and caring owner means more than a salary's increase. He took a personal interest in everyone. He said, call me Chuck. He stopped by my office along with his children. I'll have to use a bit of poetic justice here. One Purim. Just say, Chag Purim Samayach. That is more than any pay rise or bonus. You know, I often say to Colleen, whenever you just walk into a petrol station, people have got their name on it. Just say to them, Ethan. That's where he works, by the way. But Ethan, hi Ethan, how you going? And people look at you like nobody's ever called them by their name. And it means so much to people when you just, you know, I did some work for a private equity company called Champ, and there was a lady at the front desk, her name was Dom. And she had worked there for about 12 years. And I said, Dom, do you like working here? She said, I love it. I said, wow, what makes it so special? She said, yeah, every weekend before the weekend, Bill Ferris, who was the chairman of and the founder of Champ, would come up to me and say, hey Dom, what are your plans for the weekend? What are you going to do? On Monday, he would say, how was the movie? Was it a great movie? Did you enjoy it? And that's why she loved her job. She didn't say because I got a huge bonus, because I got a really big salary increase. It was because people respect people. And I really believe that's what ethics is about. I really believe that ethics is really the value and the respect that you have for people in an organization. I've seen unbelievable companies and I've seen unbelievably bad companies. And really what it boils down to, in my opinion, was where respect breaks down between different departments. And I think that when you really, businesses work like football teams or cricket teams. You can't win a cricket test having amazing bowlers with no batsmen. You can't win soccer with having defenders but no forwards. And it's the same in business. And we used to have a company weekend away, and we used to take every single person in that company away for a good reason. We wanted to make sure that if we said people are important in our company, we actually meant it. And it didn't matter whether you answered a phone on reception, whether you packed a box in our warehouse, or you're the best salesperson in that organization. If everybody is important, it doesn't matter where you work in that company, you're all part of a team, and we made sure that everybody felt respected and valued. And that's what I've always found is the most important thing in a business. And of course you've got to have a strategy. No business works without having a purpose to solve and a mission. But it's much, much easier to execute on that mission when you've got a highly energized team of people. And when you've got a great culture, it makes it that much easier to do. So I'm not sure if that's my time, Rabbi, but...
That's close. That's good.
I'll ask some more questions after we'll get into some more details.
Thank you. I'll now hand you over to Rabbi Gourarie.
Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you so much, David. I've been wanting for a long time to get David to give a shir at BINA. So thanks, that's great. The reason I call it a shir is because...
Just was waiting to get the space big enough to pack.
And the reason I refer to it as a shir specifically, and not just good business advice, because a lot of what David said really is very much in line with Torah perspectives, Jewish perspectives on employee-employee relationships and business ethics and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of out of my comfort zone tonight because I normally talk about different topics. This is not a topic I normally talk about. as my son mentioned, the Gourarie, the once famous Gourarie business gene wasn't passed down. So I'm very lucky to be a rabbi, because I don't think if I did any business it would be any good. Although, as David said, and I agree completely, that many of the principles refer to organizations, refer to anything that we do really, which is all part of the same idea. So it's a long topic. So what I wanted to do tonight is just for interest to share with you just some principles, general principles in business, the way it's discussed in Talmud, in Jewish law, and so on and so forth. So just as a bit of a just introduction, just for clarification purposes, there are many, many laws that govern business practices, bini halachot, that govern business practices. In fact, much of what we study in yeshiva in terms of Talmud is around, it's the parts of the Talmud that actually deal with transactions, transfer of ownership, employees, neighbors, and that kind of thing. But there's also a concept that we have in Jewish law called dina de malchuta dina, which means the law of the country is the law. And how that works in together with Jewish law is quite complicated. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but very often in business particularly, for example, the transfer of ownership, the moment something is transferred from the ownership of one person to another. So in Jewish law, we find that we call that kinyan. You have to pick up certain things, or with real estate, it's done a certain way. But there's a concept that can be overridden by what we call minhag hamokim, the practice of the place, or the law of the country. So the principles I'm going to share with you, and the laws I'm going to bring you examples, just really to share with you general principles, not necessarily to say that's the way it's done nowadays, because sometimes in business practice, very often the halakha is the Jewish law, we just follow the regular practice of the country. But the principles are nevertheless very, very important, and they bring up a lot of the stuff that David was talking about before. So let me just start with a couple of, I'll just share with you a few things. One, let me start with employee-employee relationships, which all boils down to two things really, and that is valuing people and commitment. And we know that in Talmud and in Jewish philosophy, there is nothing greater than giving a person dignity and giving a person value, because everyone has a need and an intrinsic desire to be valued. We know that a person is created b'tzelem Elokim, a person is created in the image of God, and everyone has a contribution to make. And as David said before, that you don't always be told what to do, your opinion has to count, and that's really predicated on a concept which the Talmud says that just like there are no two people that look alike, there are no two people that think alike, and therefore, and that's divinely designed, because everyone has a contribution to make, and it makes no difference if you own the business or you're working for someone. A need of every single individual is to be listened to, be heard, be valued, because I think the basis of every relationship, as we've talked about many times, is respect, and part of respect is valuing the individuality of the other person. In Jewish law, treating employees, we find many, many examples of how important it is. One of them is one of the 613 mitzvot in the Torah is many relate to business and employees and contracts and so on. One of them is a verse that says, "B'yomot titen scharo," that it's absolutely an obligation for a employer to pay on time, right? Not even a day late. In fact, according to Jewish law, if a person works by the day and gets paid by the day, if you didn't pay by the morning, it's in violation of one of the 613 commandments of the Torah. Even though you know the person has a bit of credit and he can last maybe another day or two, and it's an absolute obligation to make sure the person is paid on time. Not only because he needs the money, but because that he did work, and you need to value that work. And if you value that work, whatever you made up with that person to pay them needs to be done on time. Obviously, it makes a difference if a person's paid by a month or every 2 weeks, and so on. So it's a different. Whenever the agreement is, it needs to be done on time. Then we have a real concept of breach of faith, and this applies both between employers and employees, and also with customers. There are many things in the Torah where we find in Jewish law, we find that technically something could be okay, halachically, meaning it could be not binding, but nevertheless at the same time it's considered wrong because it's ethically wrong. Because there's a verse in the Torah that says, "Ve'asita hayashar ve'hatov," a person should do what is correct, integrity. In other words, there are technical laws that are in place, which when broken can cause liability and compensation requirements and so on and so forth. And then there are laws that may not result in compensation requirements, but they're considered spiritually and ethically wrong because it's just not the right thing. I'll give you an example. So one particular law I was just reading about recently is if you, let's say, engage a tutor, right, for a certain amount of lessons. I don't know, you have a boy that's bar mitzvah and you engage a bar mitzvah teacher, right? and you make up that the mitzvah teacher will, you'll have 10 lessons or per lesson, whatever you're going to pay, and so on and so forth. The halacha is that until the first lesson takes place, if there was no written contract or witness contract, the truth is that anyone can pull out, both the person who hired the teacher, both the person that is the tutor. However, if one does pull out, it's considered ethically wrong. Because if you gave your word, if you gave your promise that you will do this, even though you might not have gone through the contractual setup to make it legally binding that you can claim compensation afterwards for, it's still considered ethically wrong. And there are many, many examples of that in the Talmud, where if you do something that's not legally, even though it's not legally binding, but it's ethically wrong, and it's considered very, very bad. So that's just a couple of examples of valuing an employee, valuing another person, and treating them well. There are lots of laws also. If the agreement includes, it used to be that in the Talmud times, if you hired someone by day, you needed to feed them, and there's all kinds of things about how you need to feed them and how they need to be well fed. And in fact, the Talmud suggested if you are going to do that you clarify before exactly to everyone's agreement what that menu agreement is going to be like or look like, more or less, because if not, the person can claim I wasn't properly taken care of, and you need to make sure that was properly done. The flip side of that is commitment. So there's valuing the person, but there's also culture of commitment. So very interesting. If you look in the laws of the Talmud, the commitment of an employee is unbelievable, meaning the obligation of the employee. There's not a lot of smoke breaks and coffee breaks and lunchtime breaks, all that kind of stuff, right? And the concept of being honest from the employee's side is amazing. In other words, the concept that you're getting paid for a job and you're on company time, right? So I'll just give you an example. Part of, if it's an agreement between two Jews, like the employer is Jewish and the employee is Jewish, so the employer has to give room for the spiritual needs, the halachic needs of the employee. So for example, the employer has to provide time for the employee to eat, of course, and then to bench, right? However, I'll just show you how far this goes, right? So essentially in Talmud times, the benching, right, that we bench today. So I don't know if you know, if you say Birkat HaMazon, there's two parts to Birkat HaMazon. There's the brachot, the blessings of benching, and then there's a bunch of extra stuff that we say, which developed over time. It's part of benching. You're supposed to say all the stuff we sing, like a Rachaman, like that stuff, right? So that's actually not really originally part of benching. You really technically don't have to say it. The custom is to say it. Talmud says an employee is not allowed to say it. Employee just has to bench the minimum requirement. Why? Because he's given time to bench, but after that he's back on company time. So therefore, now obviously that doesn't apply today because again, like I said in the beginning, we follow common practice. Common practice, you give a certain amount of time, and he can bench as slow as long as he's back at the work on time, or as long as producing, whatever the arrangement is. But the principle behind that that demonstrates the commitment he's supposed to have. I was just reading recently an interesting thing, because where this is relevant today is the culture that is developed in some places where people spend a lot of time on their phone and on social media, and there's some staggering stuff out there about how much, especially when social media started and looking at phones and so on started, there's staggering stuff about how much employees actually were taking off time, company time, to actually look at technology and follow their Facebook and answer their own personal emails and so on and so forth. Which again, it depends on the culture of the business, but that is considered a problem, and in halachic terms will be considered theft because it's not your time. It's sort of company time, right? Same thing goes for using supplies, right? So like, is it okay for an employee to use stuff in the office? So there might be a standard agreement that like it's okay, under a certain time or that kind of thing. But in halachic terms, that would really need to be. It doesn't matter how cheap or expensive it is. A person cannot say, well, it's just a piece of paper. The guy can afford it. It's okay. I'm sure you won't mind if I write a quick postcard on his stationery during lunchtime. It's actually not that simple. It needs to actually be explicit permission given for that. Now, today, I don't know how it works today. Today might be sort of an unwritten permission anyway, but again, the principle sort of shows how important that is. So just a couple of general principles, and then we're going to go to the questions. So the concept of ethics, the concept of integrity and honesty in business is really, really strong in Talmudic literature. For example, one of the things this is actually a halachic thing that we learn is something called bar metzra. Bar metzra means if I'm selling a plot of land, right, and my neighbor is interested in that plot of land, right, I'm not sure what the modern secular law is, but if I'm selling a plot of land and my neighbor wants to expand his field, right? Because the Talmud talks a lot in agricultural terms. The neighbor wants to expand his field, and he's prepared, and let's say it's got a set price, and he wants it and someone else wants it. I'm obligated to sell it to the neighbor. Why? Because I'm not going to lose and he's going to gain. And that's part of what the Talmud calls v'asita hayashar v'atov. You have to do the right thing. And the right thing is, he's got kind of first right to that land because it will be to his benefit and I won't lose. And it's just the ethical thing to do, right? That kind of thing. Again, like I said before, verbal agreements are considered very, very precious. Even though they might not be legally or contractually binding, but once you've given your word for something, that concept of honesty is unbelievable, right? We also have a principle in business in the Talmud, and I don't know how that works today exactly legally, but it's a principle called Genevat Da'at, right? It's just about integrity in general, being truthful. Genevat Da'at means you're not allowed to steal someone's mind. What does that mean, to steal someone's mind? If I don't physically steal anything, but I do something to create a false impression. So we go into the whole issue, for example, of false advertising, right? There are actually quite interesting guidelines, halachically, how far you can go in false advertising, because you created a wrong impression. If you lured someone into your shop because you created a certain impression which turns out isn't exactly true, that's actually considered a real halachic problem in business. Again, it's all about integrity. The Talmud says that one thing we always have to be there's a very, very strong emphasis on this. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, this concept of honesty goes so far that one can never ever say that the amount makes a difference. So the Torah has a thing, for example, the Talmud expands on this. In olden times, they sold things by weight, right? So the idea of buyer or seller, the idea of having false weights, even very, very slightly, is considered an incredibly severe transgression. So much so, that it's considered such a terrible, evil thing that the Torah says that one is not permitted, if one's weights are not exact, even if you're not using them, it's not permitted to have them in the house, because it's an object of dishonesty, and you have to fix them as soon as possible, because otherwise it's an object of dishonesty. Even if you're not planning to use it, you're not allowed to actually use it, because it's not good to build up the sensitivity of being honest and so on. The concept of hasagat gvul is an interesting concept as well, which I'll just mention, and that's the concept of undermining someone else's business. In fact, in the Torah it's quite strict. I think it's even stricter than modern law. About opening up a store next to someone else's store, if you're going to cause him to lose his job and not have proper sustenance. And there it's a more spiritual thing that comes into it. In fact, it's interesting because one of the principles of business is to remember and to acknowledge that at the end of the day, everything comes from God. Our culture is really, really important. Integrity is incredibly important. How we treat people, how we are treated is important. We also have to remember that the blessing of our parnasa, the blessing of our sustenance comes from God, and therefore undermining someone else and causing someone else to lose their job cannot ultimately be to our benefit. And therefore, we have the laws called hasagat gvul in the Torah. An interesting thing, I'll just finish with this, and I've mentioned this in other contexts, is laws of confidentiality, just in terms of practice. In Jewish law, confidentiality is actually very, very strict. I know today in organizations, people on boards and things like that, people sign confidentiality agreements, right? In Jewish law, you don't need to sign a confidentiality agreement because it's the other way around. By default, if I tell you something, it's confidential unless I tell you it's not. So confidentiality is assumed, right? We learn that from one of the verses of the Torah. It's very interesting. It's also got to do with the idea of privacy, the idea of trust, the idea of keeping things properly, with proper honesty. Not everything that gets told to you means you can follow on, and so on and so forth. Because, just to finish with this, the Talmud says that also one of the concepts is that en habracha, if you want blessing in your business, it says the concept of keeping things refined, and keeping things private, and keeping things sort of not flaunting and not bragging, that kind of thing is also a keli, a vessel to our parnasa. So those are just a few principles in business. Again, as I say, it's not really my area, but it's the principles that we learn in the Talmud that govern business. Very much connected to what Dave was talking about before, about treating people properly, committing to people. If you promise you're going to do a job, to do it properly and faithfully. Trust between employees and employee. Taking care of customers, not stealing their mind, not creating false impressions. All that relationship between the employer, the staff, and the customer that treatment is something which is very deeply rooted in Talmudic literature. Okay.
So we'll open up for questions. I just have a few questions of my own just to start off, and anyone can answer. So one of the things you spoke about a lot was the relationship between an employer and an employee, and respect for both ways. Let's say you've hired somebody, and within a few weeks you realize that they're not good. They're actually not good at what they're doing. So I guess you have two options, right? You could fire somebody, or you can work on training them to get better, right? How would you be able to assess if somebody if they're possible to be trained, or even if you train them for 3 years, they still won't get it? Does that make sense?
From my slide presentation.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
So, actually, I don't know if anyone can. I always say there's 4 kinds of people. This is your objectives over here, and those are the values of the organization. The easiest 2 kinds of people to deal with are somebody who's in the top right quadrant. They share the values of the company and they meet their objectives. Those are your stars. The second easiest person is the person who doesn't meet their objectives, and nor do they share the values of the company, and you have to get rid of those people as quickly as possible. So, to answer your question, if the person who joined the company was just everybody loved that person, and they were real team players, I really believe you've got to be fair first and tough second. You've got to say, what can we do to educate that person who meets the objectives but who shares the values but doesn't meet the objectives? And eventually, if you can't train that person, eventually you have to say, if that person's not going to be in a position to add value to our customers, unfortunately that person's got to go. You can't keep attracting. It actually becomes a problem in a company where the good people say, even if you can't do your job properly, you get treated. You have to make those tough decisions. The hardest type of person to deal with is the person who meets the objectives but doesn't share the values. And I've never known what to call that person. And because I always call that person a star, that person a dog, that person over there is a non-performing team player. That person over here, I heard an amazing quote. It was, anyone heard of the Huffington Post, Ariana? And she sat on the board of Uber, and Uber was a company that the culture was absolutely despicable at Uber. And she actually said we had to get rid of our brilliant jerks. So there's a category for everybody, that even those people that you sometimes think our team or our company won't survive without that person because they're the best batsman, the best salesperson, the best technical person. Generally they do, but you have to actually ask those people to leave the company. But if you always have to go back to that thing, are we adding value to our customers? And if somebody may have added value, the Rabbi and I have chatted about this before, it gets really hard when every year you've got the same 52 things you've got to talk about every year, and say, how can I make sure that I keep getting people coming back to the Women's Shiur that still make it relevant this year, the year after, and the year after. And every organization, every person has to keep, if you go back to that point I made, that a company has an obligation to say, we have to invest in training and educating our people in a fast-changing world. But you can't have people in your organization just to say, it's business is business.
Yep. Anything to add to that?
I think that's good.
No?
It's not only in business. I ran a school for a few number of years. Same thing with teachers.
Yep.
Same thing in any organization. Giving people a chance. But I also, just in terms of treating people correctly, sometimes you do have to take a tough decision. It's also not only the decision you take; it's how you take it. It's how you treat the person on the way out. So I think that's good.
Okay. So I know you've been very successful, but I'm sure along every way of success there's always some setbacks. What advice would you give to people who are in business and have failed in something? How do you use that to, and that I guess applies in everything in life, but business as well.
So first of all, success shouldn't just be defined as a money number. I think success should be defined. Like I think I pride myself on the fact that I still see people today. I left my company in 2001. I still see people today, and they say, "Dave, it was the best company. I love my job, and I've never worked in a company that." And I think success for me was also seeing people achieve things they would never ever have been able to achieve, including myself. I didn't ever. If you had said to me when I started the company that one day you're going to run a company with 1,400 people, I would have looked at you and said, I think you must have drunk too much on Purim. And I didn't. And a lot of people achieve things that, as I say, we were growing in an industry. We were lucky enough to be in an industry that was growing unbelievably quickly, and people were thrown in the deep end. And the good people and most people actually swam. There were a few people who didn't. But anybody, the best, somebody who actually did extremely well out of our company, one day said to me, "You made really bad business decisions," and which I probably did. I did say that. Luckily enough, the few good ones I made outweighed all the bad ones I made. But what probably gave me a little bit of solace was when I read Frank Lowy's book. I don't know if everyone knows that at one stage Frank Lowy bought Channel 10. It was in 1987 or 1989. It was an absolute disaster, and it went into receivership. And in his book they said, "Frank, do you regret buying Channel 10?" And he said, "If I didn't take a risk, I'd still be selling salami in Blacktown." So in every business, if you're going to be in business, you have to make decisions, and not all of them work. But if you fear failure, you shouldn't ever go into business on your own. That you have to know that if you're going to make some decisions, and some are going to work and some aren't. And and I think as I say, in Israel, the startup scene has thrived over there because failure is not frowned upon. And someone will fail and I say, "Okay, what you going to do next? What's your next startup going to be?" And I think, as I say, nobody who's been in any business or run any part of a business could ever say that everything they did worked.
Isn't that a life lesson in general? I mean, life lesson.
Yep.
I don't know how it works in business, but I think failure can be viewed two ways. Either it gets you down, or it becomes a learning tool. And we've done things in BINA that haven't worked, and we've learned. I think if you reflect afterwards and you think about afterwards what actually did go wrong, you can learn for the future.
Okay. So one of the things, your big emphasis here was always treating people right and doing the right thing and integrity. Does doing things right ever make you lose out?
Yep. But if I look back at my career and say, I've got a contract at home from my builder. We've been living in our house for 3 months, and I said, "Carl, you've got to sign the contract for our builder. He needs, to get some certificate out." The contract signed November. You better take this off air in case we get in trouble. But the contract was dated October 2007. Do what I did again? Absolutely. But there are times where you make mistakes. But I can tell you, there are people who've signed contracts and non-disclosure agreements and all that. I think my record of having great outcomes by trusting people and valuing people's integrity and hoping that they trust my integrity, I think I've done as well, if not better, than people who've gone to every letter of the law. So, of course, everybody, once again, I'll never forget we had a bad debt in our company, and I was really upset, and I spoke to my dad. I said, "Dad, I'm so upset. One of our big customers went bankrupt, and we lost," I still remember, it was $70,000, and my dad said, "How much money did they spend with you over the years?" Probably $2 million, and he said, "How much profit did you make on that?" I said, "Probably about $300,000. So it cost you $230,000 to have a relationship with a customer." And then I'll never forget what he said. He said, "If you chop wood, you get splinters." and it's and it happens in anything. I remember one of Daniel's friends went to karate and had a black eye, and I said to him, if you chop wood, you get splinters.
It's a good line. Yeah. So, okay, so let's open it up. Anyone have questions to ask? No?
It's sort of more a comment. Politicians don't have any values, I don't think. Like that. They don't have morals that guide them. So they're very few. I mean, why is it not something that's possible? Like,
can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
Before the rabbi does. I actually believe, right, as I say, I think every organization, no matter whether you're a politician or whether you're running a religious organization or whatever, whether it's a school, everybody has customers. In the case of politicians, it's called the constituency. And I really believe it goes to this over here, is that if you look at how companies, shareholder value is no longer the main focus of some of America's top business leaders. I really believe the problem with politicians is politicians are actually saying, I'm actually not really worrying about my constituents. What I'm actually worried about is, what do I need to do to make sure that I get re-elected in 3 years' time, as opposed to saying, what are the best business decisions we need to be making for the country that's actually going to be, that's actually going to position us well. So I'll go back to Jack Welch. As I said, I love Jack Welch. And somebody said to Jack Welch one day, he said, Jack, he said, you keep pushing us to deliver our quarterly numbers. He said, but at the same time, you're telling us to have a long-term vision. And Jack Welch looked at the guy and says, you're right. He said, any good manager can manage short, and any good manager can manage long. But only an exceptional manager will manage short and long at the same time. And I think the problem with politicians is they're not managing long, they're managing short. They're saying, they're making decisions, what do I need to do that's going to get me? I think that's what Turnbull's no longer the Prime Minister, because every week he changed his views because the poll said this, they said this, I'm going to do this week and that next week, instead of having some conviction saying, I'm going to go out and live, this is what I believe is best for the country for the next, that's going to position us. Of course, we've got short-term objectives we've got to achieve, but how do we prepare this country for the next 20 years?
I think that's against politics.
I don't like that, right? You said, why do politicians have no values? They're not honest.
I think you should go into
politics.
Because you do.
I think throughout history, I think that's right. I think the leaders, it's a leadership issue, right? And I think the leaders that are remembered way beyond their leadership are the ones that have values and the ones that were more about the people they led than about themselves. And they had real influence, long-term influence.
Sorry, Dave, I didn't.
I'm a politician, right?
Les, please.
Yes, so firstly, thank you so much for your talk. It's been amazing, and it renews our faith in internal governance of companies. But I'm just interested in this, though. Most of the focus has actually been on the company and its shareholders and within the bubble of the company. I have a bit of experience just in terms of company against company doing businesses with each other. And the sort of corporate integrity that comes out of your talk in relation to what happens within a company, in my experience, seems to be very, very foreign when it comes to relations between companies. One company doing business with another, and they end up at loggerheads and they end up in a court eventually. Truth only seems to have relevance to the extent to which it can produce a desirable legal outcome. And in my sort of distance experience, the sort of integrity you're talking about is very, very foreign to the way companies, there's an expression which I absolutely abhor, and that is that business is business. Business is business, and if it can produce a profit, then everything else becomes rather irrelevant. And I'm just interested, David, to hear what your experience is, not within the company, but your relationship with other companies, and whether that sort of prism of integrity through which you see the world is reflected in the way others seem to treat your company and other companies.
Yeah, I think every business has to deal with other businesses. That's, I always say business would be so easy if you didn't need staff and customers. And, but companies are people, and it's really, I always believe a company, the values of a company starts at the top and it generally filters down. As I say, I just finished this book reading about Disney, and well, a great example is if you look at Microsoft, and what I really like is that I think that empathetic leaders are really thriving today. That I think if you look at Microsoft as a company, the CEO is a guy, Satya Nadella. He's a very, very soft-spoken man. He's got 2 kids who are, who have disabilities, and Microsoft, in my opinion, was on its way to irrelevance. And they would have existed for many, many years to come. There are lots of companies that exist. I think BlackBerry still exists, but they're irrelevant. There's we can name hundreds of companies that are still out there, but if they disappeared tomorrow, none of us would know. And he turned a company with 140,000 people, literally on a dime, by, in my opinion, having a great vision, but also having amazing values. I heard him speak recently. He was in Australia, and they compete heavily with Amazon in one part of their business. And somebody said, "So what do you think about Amazon?" He said, "Well, we've got our business model. Amazon have got theirs." And he said, the market will decide who they want to buy from. He said, "But the sun's bright enough to shine on both of us." He didn't badmouth the competition. You can just see he's someone you'd want to deal with. And I think, so in all our dealings and all the time that I've been in business, have I ever had bad business experience? Absolutely. But I'd say on the whole, I really genuinely believe most people are decent people. I really genuinely believe that. But everybody wants to, everybody is trying to, you're trying to build a business and make a profit so you can invest in your people and your staff and yourself, and so is the company that you're dealing with. And I think, we had a few tough customers, but on the whole, I'd say, I always say, never ever was I prejudiced because I was Jewish or because I was South African. I really believe that, in Australia, I really believe that if you do what you say, people will give you a go. And that's honestly what I found, that if you say something and don't deliver on it, I think it doesn't matter who you are, what you lose respect.
Right.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, David, for your time. It was brilliant.